All right, this next thing, if any of you follow my artist page and the notes that I post up there with some of my poetry, you've probably seen this one. Originally, it was never meant to be done on the mic. Like I said, took a break from writing, I had to find myself again. And where normally when I hit that point in my life, I start, just looking through, okay, back in 94, this is what I was writing. In 96, this is what I was writing. In 02, this is what I was writing. I decided to take another approach and actually chronicle myself. And learned a lot about who I was, who I am. Actually helped me get back into it. Little by little, I started penning more work out. This is, I guess, kind of my autobiography. Age 13. At first it was an assignment, a chore, a thing I did reluctantly, left to the judgment and critique of those who would tell me what to think about, what to feel, what to write about, but never really teach me the ways to harness that which they say resides in us all. Then came one, who 3 days after hearing me say, I can't, finally told me, forget the assignment. Find what fascinates you and put it on paper. The fruits of my labor resulted in her encouraging me to write more. Several times she spoke of the greats. I couldn't really understand the comparison. I'm not Shakespeare, or Poe, or Whitman, or that Kerouac guy you keep talking about, I told her. I rebelled and buried it deep. Age 15. It became my quote-unquote dirty little secret. I would deny it. I would lie to myself about it. Surrender my secrets to it and then burn it, shred it, crumble it up and throw it away. The would-be football jock writing poetry? Never! Not until an ex-girlfriend spent hours on the phone with me. It's okay to release through writing, she would tell me. Now me, I come from an artistic family. I loved art in general. I loved painting, I loved sketching, but I was mediocre with that. I reveled in the moment that I learned to play a song or two, but I had no patience for mastering music. You're good with calligraphy, she jokingly noted. Somewhere in my teenage mind, this actually made sense. The secret didn't seem so dirty now that I had someone to share it with. Though that partnership didn't last, I did eventually learn to share, but only with those who would indulge my whole gotta keep it quiet thing. Sometimes I found myself playing the role of Cyrano. I was discovered once, and I don't know how, but I managed to convince the girl that the words were from her boyfriend and not from me, because I'd never write that mushy love stuff. Age 17. The fire had long since begun to burn. Structured 4-line stanzas, A.B. pentameter. From nights on the Jersey Shore to mornings in the Carolina mountains, these were my usual fare when I wasn't writing to the tune of my favorite songs. As is the way of life, I'd eventually lose touch with those who shared my secret, those whom I'd often written about. That didn't stop me though. By this point, I'd written, burned, shredded, crumbled up, or sometimes simply given away more thoughts and feelings than I'd ever verbalized. I wielded pen and paper with a maddening fever and did nothing to stop it. Age 19. I sat in crowded rooms, arms wrapped over my notebook, head bowed low. The rest of the world became my muse. And if I ran out of paper, I'd write on the inside of a book cover, on a napkin, on my hands and arms, whatever was convenient, all the while never letting anybody see what I was up to. Cue Nicholas Lyle Broder. On the top floor of a crowded coffee shop in Fayetteville, North Carolina, he took my notebook from beneath my arms and challenged me to step from the proverbial shadows. There, before an intimidating room of unfamiliar faces, I learned the truth of catharsis. Nick died 3 months later, but before his death, he'd given me a gift that I could never repay. I don't think some people ever realized why I took his death so hard. With one of his final suggestions, I took my writing and performing in every direction that I could manage. One giant stream of consciousness, a new addiction, a renewed fever. I let it flow. Still though, I despised being called a poet, or even a performance poet. I took on a mentor in the form of Neil Ray, not that I gave him any choice in the matter. I made it my business to keep writing. We speak poetry every day, Neil would later tell me. We just don't always recognize it as such. I made it my business to keep sharing and to open the eyes, minds, and hearts of any who would listen to the possibilities before them, to bring more poets out of the shadows. So rose the Northstar. Age 22. For a brief time I stopped performing, stopped sharing, even stopped writing. It was a woman who got me to start writing in earnest, and it was a woman who managed to pull me away from it. I've long since known that she was a little jealous of my attention garnered by my antics on the mic, but truthfully, I thought it was the flirtatious smiles and glances of some of the women in the room. Years later, she told me she was fine with that. She kind of liked it and took it as a compliment to her taste in men. But I remember the night she angrily hit me with, "Well, why don't you go off and marry your poetry?" It was like surreal. It was like something out of a movie, but it really happened. She really meant it. Well, I compromised on a lot, but in the end, she became the first of 2 ex-fiancés. And I returned to the mic with a new energy, a new outlook, humbled by a new understanding of life, love, and the brush with local fame that I previously experienced, not to mention the truth of my ego. Age 26, I'd eventually stopped correcting those who called me poet. I was being pretentious. I made my peace with this. By now, my writing had turned more introspective and simultaneously more lyrical. At this point, I had hosted, co-hosted, and/or performed in more venues than I knew what to do with, sometimes 3-4 days a week. I'd stopped thumbing my nose at the academics, except in occasional fits of rebellion just to, keep the party going. I also made my peace with the discovery that the women in my life, be they my friend or my lover, were both my greatest weakness and my greatest source of strength and inspiration. After a year in the desert, I began a journey of deliberate self-discovery. Work took me to southern Vermont, where, not far from the final resting place of Robert Frost, I worked with Lance Lee Trim to try and reinvigorate the open mic scene. In Lance, I found a kindred spirit and a glimpse of who I might have been if I'd taken another path. I remember the day that I told him he could do better than taking inspiration from me, he responded by taking the stage name Southstar. Then I moved to Albany, New York, where I fell in with another open mic crowd. This leading to a partnership with folk musician Corey Huff, as we brought about our own open mic scene in nearby Schenectady. It was during this time that I had the pleasure of occasionally performing in a cafe in Saratoga that had previously seen the likes of Ani DeFranco and Bob Dylan early in their careers. So many new sensations, so many new inspirations. It was intoxicating. Like all good things, though, it came to an end. After watching helplessly as the second fiancé walked away, I felt it was time to let go of things in my attempts to move on. I left for Germany. Not long after, Lance died. And again, I laid down my pen. Age 32. 32. I felt I was a fool to think I could keep it buried for too long. I wanted nothing more to do with it, but I can feel it clawing its way to the surface, burning within me. I sit here in a button-down shirt and shorts and sandals at a table outside of a Columbia, South Carolina coffee shop, still getting used to my glasses, fidgeting nervously with my pen, and skipping through the music on my iPhone as I wonder what to do with myself. Have you ever returned home after years away? Instead of finding familiar haunts, things have changed so much that you're struggling to recognize a simple street sign? I take a drag off my cigarette, feeling just like that as I stare blankly at the notebook in front of me. I feel like I'm starting over from scratch. It's frightening in its own way, and I find myself wishing that Nick were here, or Neil, Dave, Jen, Ashley, Timmy, Mitra, Josh, Sherry, Chet, Brent, Ron, Glenn, Radar, Jeff, Kara, Chrissy, or even poor Lance. So many people, so many places, cities, countries. So much to say and yet so few words to do it justice. To answer the frequently asked question, will I ever again print that familiar scribble scratch Northstar on a sign-in sheet again? Well, if you're hearing this, then obviously yes. If the fates are kind enough, that much is certain. But not yet. No longer content with regurgitating old words, I must first reacquaint myself with this, my oldest of lovers. On a side note, I find it funny that I phrase it that way, just as the chorus, "I need a lover that won't drive me crazy," comes blaring through my headphones. So why am I writing this? Truthfully, I don't know. What I do know is that, as I've said before, a giant reset button has been pressed on many aspects of my life, including apparently this one. That statement holds no optimism. Scary as it may be, however, it's not entirely a bad thing. As before, I won't let it stop me, not with that familiar energy beginning to surge within me. Given time, I will again let it flow. Thank you.